As we are talking about the science of deliberate creation, we've found an even softer way of describing to you, and we've begun calling it the art of allowing, which means the art of choosing a vibration which allows my connection to my source of well-being. But in order to understand the art of allowing, you must accept the premise of this universe, which we promise you is one of well-being. There's only a stream of well-being that flows, which you may be allowing fully or diminishing in some regard. But well-being is the only stream that flows. Sometimes people will look at the manifestation and they will see someone sick, and they will describe them as the holder of illness. And their implication is that this person is sick, not well, and that they got sick because some sickness ambushed them. And we're wanting to help you to reorient yourself to the way this universe really works by understanding sickness didn't ambush them. They held thoughts that disallowed little by little the wellness that would have been there otherwise. You say, yes, but why does it happen to little ones? And we say little ones can pinch off well-being too. Power of influence is very strong. And so what you have to begin saying is, I am the creator of my own reality. I get to control what manifests in my experience. But before you can control what manifests in your experience, you've got to control the way you feel. And before you can control the way you feel, you've got to control what you give your attention to. And before you can control what you give your attention to, you've got to understand what your emotions tell you. And before you can understand what your emotions tell you, you've got to get out there and mix it up a little bit and create some things you want and create some things you don't want in order to understand how it works. When you begin to discover the path of least resistance, you got to understand this is the most important thing that you will ever hear from us or anyone else. The path of least resistance always feels good if it is coming in alignment with that which is your source. Now, we want to be clear about this. If you've taken the time to meditate, if you've been appreciating, if you've been basking, if you've been looking for positive aspects, if you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on, if you are in alignment with who you really are, then the path of least resistance as you are approaching a stranger or a friend always feels like, I love this person. If you are in alignment with who you really are, your attention to yourself always feels like, I really like who I am, and I'm excited about who I'm becoming. The path of least resistance to someone who's in alignment with source energy always feels like life is wonderful and life is good, and I'm eager about what is coming while I'm satisfied with what is. The path of least resistance to someone who's in alignment with source energy is always a glorious, good feeling experience. But sometimes, if you are, for a period of time, not very well connected with who you are, if you've been struggling at work or arguing with your mate or worrying about money, or if there's something in your body that you're worried about, and so you've been giving an inordinate amount of attention to things that you don't want, so that your vibrational proclivity, your vibrational average is sort of in a not so good feeling place where you're feeling ornery pretty often, or overwhelmed pretty often, or guilty about something, or blameful about something, then the path of least resistance for you might feel like more of the same. Deliberate creating is like going to a buffet and saying, I would like some of that on my plate, please. I would like some of that, and I would like some of that. Deliberate creating is not going to a buffet and saying, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that. Can you imagine the nice people behind the counter as you take your plate and you say, no, not that. No, 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 not that, not that. No, no, not that. No, not that, not. And soon they would say, why don't you just take your time and tell us what you do want? It will go ever so much quicker. Well, all right, but don't give me any of that. And be sure to don't get any of that on my plate. You understand it when it comes to buffets, and we would like to remind you that you are here in this vibrational buffet where there is so much to choose from, and whatever you choose causes you to offer a vibration. So if you're looking out, watching your television, or watching your neighborhood, or watching where you live, as you're looking out and finding those things you don't want and fixating on them, you've put them on your plate. And then you get all worried because you're sure somebody's going to shove it in your mouth. And we say, you really have more control than that. In other words, we don't find you very fearful at the buffet. You're not really afraid, once you're past the age of 3 or 4 anyway, that somebody's going to make you eat something that you don't want to eat. In this vibrational-based universe, you get to choose what you give your attention to. And giving your attention to it is equivalent to putting it on your plate. And once you've got it on your plate, there's a pretty sure chance it's going to get in your mouth. So what you're wanting to do is, up front, be more aware of what you're giving your attention to. So deliberate creating is not about controlling the conditions so that you can have a better feeling response. Deliberate creating is about deliberately choosing a thought, understanding that law of attraction then will make that thought that you chose even more available to you next time. Law of attraction says that when you give your attention to something and you achieve a vibrational alignment with it for as little as 17 seconds, something happens in your vibrational nature that makes you have easier access to that thought now. And if you maintain it for another 17 seconds, it reaches another vibratory level where you have even easier access. And if you keep that up until you have maintained your undiluted attention to a subject for as little as 68 seconds, what happens is that vibration is now more easily accessible by you. It becomes a path of less resistance. The first 17 seconds, you have to focus, because this new thought of your choosing may not be the path of least resistance. You may have other thoughts that are more active. In other words, take a subject like dollars. Which do you think is more active in your vibration? Plenty of dollars or not enough dollars? Well, we can tell you by the way it feels which is more active. We can tell you by the way it's manifesting which is more active. Which is more active in your vibration? Vibrant health or worrisome illness? You can tell by what's manifesting, but even better, you can tell by the way you feel when you approach the subject. Sometimes we tease you. We say, which feels better, blame or guilt? And you always say blame. Blame feels much better than guilt. And we say, those are terrible choices that we're giving you there. But the reason that we are pointing it out in that way is because under those conditions, the path of least resistance feels like that. And so when we begin talking about the art of allowing, the path of allowing and the path of least resistance are really the same thing, aren't they? One is spoken a little more positive. We would rather that you allow than that you not resist, but it means the same thing. And so the reason that we are wanting to get your attention about this art of allowing or path of least resistance is because sometimes you say, all right, well, Abraham says that if I will follow the path of least resistance, then my life will get better and better. And we say, you must first align with the energy that is really you. You've got to find some way of recognizing the vibrational center of who you are before the path of least resistance is always going to feel like that life-giving, uplifting path. And so when we say to you, what is the path of least resistance? The path of least resistance from your place of connection with who you are always, always, always feels good. So if it's easier for you to criticize someone than praise someone, if your path of least resistance is more negative than it is positive, then that only means you're not in alignment with who you really are. And that basis must be understood first. You don't walk into a room and look for a dark switch. You know there is not one. You do not say the sun comes up and lights our day, and at night the blob comes up and blocks our night. In other words, you don't talk about a source of darkness. You know that you can resist the light. And it is our promise to you that there is not a source of evil, there is not a source of sickness, there is not a source of all of this stuff that you consider to be unwanted stuff. It's just you somehow or other achieving vibrational harmony with something that is not allowing the well-being to flow. And the reason that so many of you do it is because you look around into your environment and you see things that you like, and you say yes to them, but then you see things that you don't like and you shout no at them. And you begin to develop more patterns of shouting no at what you don't want than you do of shouting yes at what you do want, which is the story that we told you earlier about the buffet. You know it's ridiculous. You don't tell those nice people behind the counter, I don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that. And yet, from time to time in your environment, you talk more about what you don't want than about what you do want. In other words, most of you are so aware of what you want, but often are speaking about what you want from a vantage point that doesn't get you quickly there, because you are more oriented about what you don't want than about what you do want. Now, we want to be very clear and fair about this. You are living very good lives. Your expectation of well-being in this physical environment is in a very, very powerful place. Because of the way that you live and the environment that you have evolved to, as you look around, you have come to expect, as a matter of course, a very nice lifestyle. And as a result of that expectation, you are living, comparatively speaking, an extraordinary lifestyle. Look at the way you live. But we want to help you not only to live a wonderful lifestyle because you are looking around and finding things in your environment that cause you to offer a vibration that lets more of that in. We would like you to become such powerful creators that you could stand in an absolute void of the things that you want, and with the power of your mind, activate a vibration about what you want, so that law of attraction has to give it to you. Oh, don't misunderstand. We don't want you to start putting yourself apart from things that you adore. We just want you to, especially for a little while, get it turned around in your mind where you are no longer such a responder to conditions. You are instead more of a deliberate offerer of vibration. We would like you to know that anyone who is sick could change their thoughts for an afternoon and be well. We would like you to know that anyone who doesn't have enough money could change their thoughts for an afternoon and turn their financial tide. We would like you to know that this powerful universe is responding to the clarity of your mind. And that if you are offering confusion where you say, I want it, but, I want it, but, I want it, but, I'd like to have that, but I can't afford it. I'd like to look like that, but I look like this. I want that, but I've got 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 this. That gets you nowhere. But when you leave out, but I've got this, and say, I like that, and I'd like that, and wouldn't that be nice, and how about this, and this feels good, and did you see that, and I know someone who did that, and wouldn't that be nice, and I remember that, and I'd like to have that. I love that. Ooh, that's beautiful. Thank you for this. Thank you for that. When you get into that sort of mode, and you leave out the, but I've got this, the but I've got this stops being dominant. And when it stops being dominant, it stops being the path that resists. And when the resistance stops, the well-being that you have been calling for all of the days of your life comes in. If you could see an aerial view of your experience, you would be bowled over with the amount of extraordinary circumstances and events that have been lined up for you. Talk about pre-paving. You can't prefer anything, big or small, loud or quiet, silent, unspoken, or shouting to the boundaries of the universe. You can't prefer anything that source energy doesn't line up for you. 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 100 or 1,000 different ways of bringing it to you. Because you are worthy beings on the leading edge of thought who deserve everything that you have the ability to imagine. That is the promise that you live as you come forth into these physical bodies. You're genius creators. And if you're not living most of what you want, it's because you've got your attention on something else. That's all that it could be. So, the art of allowing is about finding things to think about that feel good while I think about them, and therefore allow everything I've ever said I wanted to flow in perfect order. We're done. Goodbye. We are eager to talk with you about anything that is important to you. You will discover a magnificent unfolding here. Nothing will be left untended to. Just relax and make a statement here and now that I will leave this gathering fully satisfied, and everything that I'm wanting to know that is formulated within me now will be clearly and easily answered. Also, you might throw in, and if there is anything that I'm on the brink of understanding, I'd like to get that too. And you also might throw in, And I feel absolute appreciation for all of my other co-creative physical and non-physical friends who will help this poignant focal point.